what would you tell them what carbon markets are?
The simplest of terms, look at it as a market. A definition of market, there's a buyer, there's a seller, and there's something that is being traded. Within the carbon markets, what is being traded is
Hello everyone, my name is Grace and I'm the host of Driving Eco-Sustainability, My Perspective. Today we are going to be talking about an exciting and thought-provoking topic, sometimes considered controversial, and it's trading in carbon markets. Can carbon markets single-handedly solve the climate change crisis? I am pleased to be joined by Solomon, someone who has done some work around clean cooking, a carbon market specialist, and he is going to be sharing his perspectives, his views, his experience, and some of his knowledge in this space. Welcome.
Thank you very much, Grace.
Yes.
Good to have myself here and just joining the discussion.
Yes. So who is Solomon, and what can you share with us about yourself in relation to carbon markets? How do you come to be part of this space, really?
Well, looking at 7 years back, but
Yes.
maybe I could start by talking about where my journey into carbon markets comes in. I studied forestry at the university, and in forestry, we studied what we talk about payment of ecosystem services. But largely, when you talk about forest conservation or enrichment of land, its contribution, then it ties a lot to, of course, reducing emission or removing carbon from the atmosphere. And I think that science is very clear to anyone, a young child who has gone to primary and everything. So as a person, yes, I would speak that I am a forester first, but more an environmentalist. So over the last 7 years, the discussion has been, where do I find my journey into my professional career? And I landed into the concept of, okay, what is a forest and how is it beneficial to society and everything? And that's where actually my journey into carbon markets comes in. So over the last 7 years, I have been practicing initiatives that are geared towards promoting, one, biodiversity conservation,
Yes.
but also enhancing livelihood. And that ties to my journey. I currently work with GIZ as a carbon markets advisor, or a climate change carbon markets advisor. But I've also worked with carbon developers. I've also worked with carbon verifiers.
Yes.
And those are basically things that people who are not used to it find it challenging, but it's just the terminology that exists within the space. So my experience within this has been more on championing initiatives that would promote removal of carbon emissions. Of course, when you talk about the topic of carbon, we understand that very many people don't understand it.
Yes, that's where I was actually going.
And I'm very, very excited to be here to just share a bit of what I know and who I am basically in this space.
Yes. So if you were to simplify to a layman today, what would you tell them what carbon markets are? In the simplest of terms.
In the simplest of terms, look at it as a market. A definition of market, there's a buyer, there's a seller, and there's something that is being traded. Within the carbon markets, what is being traded is emissions reductions or removals. And by the definition of emission reductions and removals are basically carbon dioxide being removed from the atmosphere or reduced from the atmosphere. So the unit is called a credit or a carbon credit. And 1 unit of a carbon credit is an equivalent of 1 ton of carbon dioxide.
Okay.
Or an equivalent of carbon dioxide. So these gases in this case the carbon dioxide itself, or the equivalents are, say, greenhouse gases. Methane is an example, hydrofluorocarbons and the likes. So in the simplest terms, it's the selling or buying and selling of carbon emission reductions, or what we call carbon credits.
Yes.
Yeah.
So in a typical carbon markets transaction, who are the key parties involved?
There are quite a number of people along the way. We have the carbon seller. We have the buyer. Yeah. We have the verifier, we have the standards body, then we have the regulators as well.
So can you just tell us who a carbon seller is, who a buyer is, a verifier, and a regulator?
Great. So when you talk about that, let's speak from the point of the buyer. I mean the seller in this case. The seller is someone who has emissions reductions. Yeah. And so for you to have the value, the product that you're selling in this case, you must have contributed to what I said earlier about emission reductions or removals. That means that you have to develop an activity which will remove carbon dioxide or an equivalent of carbon dioxide from the atmosphere.
Okay, so let's presume it's forest. I planted a forest.
I was going to give an example of that. So it could be a forest, could be that an initiative that is also going to say use a technology that will remove or reduce the amount of carbon emissions that are coming into the atmosphere. So the example could be that I am a forest owner or anything. So if you have your forest, then it's going to remove, from science through photosynthesis, carbon dioxide is going to be removed and be stored into the plant. So the amount that you remove in the end is what is called the emissions reduction. That is what contributes to your carbon credits, and you can trade that. The seller or the buyer in this case could be someone who has overshot their emissions. So it could be like a company, a business, or anything. And of course, in transactions or doing businesses, either you're moving in transport or in manufacturing or in oil and gas or anything like that, your activities are contributing to the increment of removals. You get it? They're contributing to the increase in carbon dioxide or equivalents of carbon dioxide or greenhouse gases, to be specifically. So these greenhouse gases, what happens is, through what we call a regulation, or countries agreed through the Kyoto Protocol. Now that's another thing that needs to be discussed here. But also, it's more like we agreed and said, from time immemorial, as early as before industrialization, our global temperatures have been increasing, and mainly because of human activities. Of course, other factors are there, but the main contributor to incrementing carbon dioxide in the atmosphere, which has, of course, in the end contributed to, say, increase in temperature, global temperatures, which is definitely now affecting all of us, is mainly from our human activities. And these human activities has largely been from industrialization.
Yes.
So collectively, through a global scale, countries agreed and said, you know what, we need to work on reducing our the amount of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere if we are to reduce the global temperatures, because the effects are so bad. Yeah, it affects our livelihood, it affects how we exist. So because of that, countries agreed and said, we are going to set limits, or what we say caps, for how much you can emit.
Yes.
Yeah. What is allowable. Yeah. And if you overshoot it, then it means that you are at a negative. So to pay off, you need to maybe trade it with another person who doesn't have. So I have something, which is the reductions, and another person doesn't have it. So just in the similar market, you buy what you do not have. If I don't have a shirt, then definitely I have to buy it.
Yes.
Same way, because you have overshot your limits, then you have to buy it if you are to actually come to a balance. So the balance here was looking at how do we limit the amount of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere, or how do we remove it so that life can continue as normal.
Yes.
Life can be better than it is, because every time the amount of carbon dioxide increases in the atmosphere, it's contributing, it's affecting our livelihood. And the discussion is on how do we settle that on a common ground.
So I would be right to say that in a typical carbon markets transaction, a buyer, a seller is the one who has, let's say, has planted a large scale forest. Then a buyer is of the carbons is the usual emitter, a business, a company that is into maybe industrialization, mass production, manufacturing, or into any form of emission. Then the verifier would be the set international standards under the Kyoto Protocol, for example.
Yes.
Or then the policy maker would be the ones who set the regulations and the laws that are governing the markets.
Exactly.
Yes.
Exactly.
So how are carbon markets an effective tool in climate action?
Well, it all ties to the global goals that we have as the world itself. Our goal is to, from Paris Agreement and Kyoto Protocol, the goal was to reduce the amount of carbon dioxide from the atmosphere in order to, of course, get the benefits that come from it. So we agreed, or countries agreed in 2015, that will limit our carbon emissions by less than 2. Our global temperatures by 2%.
Yes.
And the goal through the Paris Agreement. And that goes to, but now the efforts are to say, let's not go beyond 1.5%, 1.5 degrees Celsius, beyond the baseline that in this case, pre-industrial age of the 90s. So speaking from a point of how does it benefit, how does it contribute to climate action or climate change mitigation, the big picture is we want to reduce the amount of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere, and there are no incentives for it. Yeah. When I tell you to plant trees, for example, and you don't have an incentive, yet there's a company that is investing a lot of money, to do mass production and contributing to the increment of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere, then there's no balance in this case. So countries agreed and said, no, we have to come to what? Common level where we don't go beyond that. And through that, we need to put a cap where someone should not emit. So every year, the target is set. Yeah. And that for example, when I give you a target of, say, you're only allowed to emit 5, next year it won't be the case. They'll reduce it to, say, 3. You get it? Then the next time they'll reduce it to 3. The goal is, in the end, as someone is building their businesses, running it, it shouldn't be as usual. It should be going to a point where there's no emission itself. Or you're trying to remove, all through your production processes, you're removing anything that would contribute to, say, increment of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere, which in the end contributes to that. So the incentive here is the one that plays a lot in contributing to the climate action. Incentive to, 1, promote innovation in a sense that whoever is emitting is reducing, but whoever is also removing from the atmosphere benefits from it because it's an effort. It's a value that they're adding to this effort of ensuring that we meet or reduce the carbon in the atmosphere.
Now, I'm happy that you did mention the Paris Agreement during your discussion, because I do know that it's currently the main tagline and the main policy foundation for climate action and international climate change policy. And under Article 6, I think under Article 6, that's where the carbon markets mechanism comes from. And I think at the last COP29, the Article 6 was operationalized because the issue has always been that Article 6 exists, carbon markets are in place, but the issue is there hasn't been a structured international guideline that is going to guide people on how they are going to do the carbon trading. So how do you think, how effective has Article 6 been in advancing the cause and the role of carbon markets in a reduction of climate change?
Well, frankly speaking, it took about 10 years for it to be operationalized or for the rule book to finally be agreed on. You get it, eh? And from the last scope, the goal was to increase on investment to promote climate actions, yeah, especially in the developing states, yeah, but also ensure that we increase our ambitions in ensuring that we are moving to low carbon pathways. And when you talk about low carbon pathways, like everything that we're doing should be in a sense that it reduces the amount of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere. Of course, especially speaking from a point of an African point of view, our contribution to, say, global carbon emission is very low. Collectively, as Africa, we contribute only 4% of the carbon dioxide that is in the atmosphere. That leaves 96% being contributed by the developing states. Yeah. These developing states, of course, have accumulated a lot of wealth from those actions. Yeah. And throughout the discussions that happened at COP, it was more on let's be fair. Yeah. We have resources that we want to invest in, but if we invest in them, it's definitely going to contribute to, say, what you are doing. So we don't want to do what you did in your development processes, but we also want to up the ladder, improve our economies and everything. So you, as a developed state, invest in Africa so that while we are doing our businesses, we are also being mindful of how much we emit, or we're trying to reduce as much as we emit. So the big picture for it here, when you talk about carbon markets, there are three things that I should talk about, or Article 6, basically. We have Article 6.2, which is a cooperative agreement. In this case, countries can trade bilaterally. So in this case, and that should contribute to your NDCs. You know that every country had to establish their NDCs. And these NDCs are supposed to be ambitious. Every 5-year cycle, you're supposed to increase your ambition levels in how much you're going to reduce from the atmosphere. And by 2030, for example, some countries that established that they would probably be at zero emission or net zero emission. And in this case, the balance of how much is traded, how much goes into the atmosphere is reduced vis-a-vis how much is saved. Ideally, things would be like normal. So speaking from that point of view, all countries had to agree. And this agreement is on if you've highly invested previously in emissions, in contributing to the emissions, definitely you should also invest so much into those who did not contribute to what is the problem now, which is climate change. So that while we are also developing as a developing state, we are mindful of contributing or ensuring that at least our emission levels are as very low as possible. Then those countries that have developed should also now look at innovating technologies that would ensure that they capture the carbon or ensure that it's not in the atmosphere, so that we reach a common ground.
Yes.
Yeah, so that has been the main discussion. So countries can agree and say that we will finance your climate actions and you will implement the climate projects.
Yes, so I wanted to know, because like you've shared, bilaterally, we have to recognize that the biggest discussion has been at the point that developing countries feel like they are paying the price for something they are not responsible for.
Yeah.
Yes, and then the developed countries also feel like, why should we finance climate action, or why should we seem like we are financing climate action initiatives in other countries?
Mm-hmm.
Why should we be giving money? Why should we be channeling financing in this country, in other countries, in the developing countries? So it's at that point that I want to ask, do you think carbon markets have been effective in addressing the underlying negative impacts of climate change that are disproportionately affecting the developed countries in the global south, yet they are not the majority emitters of greenhouse gases?
Do I think? Yes and no, but I would likely say yes. And of course, the no comes from whoever is arguing. Yeah, but yes, in a sense that, of course, investment is coming into Africa. The big picture is it enough? Yeah, is it enough? when you talk about, say, 3 billion annual investment into least developed countries or low developing countries being contributed by the developed states, then that money should be largely being contributed, would come to the country to contribute to the development needs. I'll give a point of, say, if we develop a project, all carbon projects ideally should have an aspect of additionality. And when you talk about additionality, we're talking about SDGs, in this case, contributing to the SDGs. The focus is not only reducing the emissions, but also improving the livelihood of the people in that state. It could be promoting investment. An example of a clean cooking solution, for example, an example of e-mobility or electric vehicles, for example. All these are things that Africa are interested in having, or developing countries are interested in having. If you talk about a clean cooking, for example, as an example, for example itself, we know that clean cooking contributes largely to, contributes to very many SDGs, improved health, because in the end, you are not faced with, or you're using a technology which is energy efficient, number one, which is cleaner. So that is contributing to health. It's also contributing to education. Other projects also, for example, tree projects or tree planting projects that I have at least witnessed. When you design a project, you must state what you're adding as a value. So sometimes people invest in, say, establishing in schools in those remote areas where the forest would be. Yeah, they establish a school, they establish health centers and the likes. So all these investments are an addition that contributes, of course, to development of the states. Yes. The big picture is whether it's enough. And that's where the discussion is. Those who are not emitting or emitting very low are saying, no, we have been affected. And when you look at the countries that are affected most, because we do not have enough infrastructure or better infrastructure or even knowledge or capacity to be able to adapt to the effects of climate change, then we are a very disadvantaged point of view. Give a case of Uganda itself. When it rains and the floods are there, the livelihoods are affected. I mean, if I am poor and I don't have ways of managing it, then definitely I'm going to be affected. Drought.
Solomon, at the risk of being controversial, can we ever get to a point where investment is enough?
Investment can never be enough, yes. I would say. But again, efforts should be done, and the efforts should be that are being done is sitting. I mean, having the conference of parties or having those annual meetings is also one way of having a common ground and agreeing. Remember, in Glasgow, the goal was 100 billion, but then it was tripled to $300 billion. You get it, eh? So every time you have the conversation, like I'm having a conversation with you, we are reaching some common ground, yeah, where we're saying, yes, we have done something, but there's still more that we can do, yeah? And that is, from a human point of view, the conversation should always go on. And every now and then, fairness starts to come in, yeah? Investment starts to increase. And having to hear the voice of the people who are most affected actually is what speaks more to actually this table.
Yes.
Yep.
So now you see, one of the most touted criticisms around carbon markets is that it's basically really just cleansing emissions of businesses, of countries that are the leading emitters of greenhouse gas emissions, really. So now I'll bring it down to businesses as leading emitters in an economic setting. How effective are carbon markets in ensuring that actually companies go ahead and reduce their greenhouse gas emissions, and they are not just going on to just purchase credits? And it's not about that, let me emit, then I will offset with the credits. But actually a business is actively reducing its greenhouse
Putting an
gas
effort.
emissions.
Putting an effort to ensure that they reduce their emissions. I think it still stands to the standards and methodologies that I applied. And of course, standards bodies exist to establish those methodologies. Which methodologies are the principles that should govern how the action that someone reports. For example, if I know this is how much I contribute, the methodology should be clear that it measures the amount of carbon dioxide, for example, or emissions that someone is contributing in the atmosphere. And when we say we are setting a goal to reduce this, it should be transparent. And the picture that we've been having, especially throughout all this discussion, to one, promote transparency and increase integrity. Yeah. And of course, that has been a discussion over time. Avoid leakages in a sense that someone reports something that is not true. You get it, eh? Someone reports something that is not true based on how they're running their businesses. Yeah. So here is when most innovators or scientists are trying to encourage innovations to ensure that this is actually tracked in real time. We can see, we can tell, that this is how much this person is contributing. With that information, it should also be clearly available for anyone to access. And that's why we have now the new registry under UNFCCC, which each country is supposed to report through. It should be visible to anyone. I should be able to see it. You should be able to see it. The methodology is very clear, is very understood by everyone. And that's actually what is going to remove what we call the biases that exist in it. The big picture here is that standard reporting exactly as it would be, and is it very understood by everyone in the space? And that's the discussion that the scientists are having to ensure that everything is clear, everything is understood, and it's practical, and it's real, and it's measurable.
Yes.
So if you say you're removing this amount of carbon from the atmosphere, if we did a verification, for example, an audit, an independent audit, would we get the exact thing?
Okay.
Yeah. Would we get the exact thing that you're talking about? Yeah, because the greenwashing, or what would say the biases that exist here, is that some people report things that are not factual.
Yes.
Yeah. I say that I'm removing this amount of carbon from the atmosphere, but in the end, when you do the verification, you find that that's so loose ends. Yeah. Of course, those reports have existed, and that's where actually the integrity of the carbon markets at one point went off. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. But they sat into the sitting room, and still people are still trying to innovate ways of ensuring that it comes to a very critical, integral thing. And the emphasis has been on integrity, ideally. Yes. If the integrity comes out clearly, then I would say that it would contribute to what everyone is trying to meet.
You've mentioned something very important actually all through your discussion. Is the question of integrity.
Yeah.
Carbon markets, for them to be successful, we are going to have to develop structures that enhance integrity, transparency in reporting, accuracy, and also ensuring responsibility for emitters who are providing false information or who are providing misleading information, when in reality they are prioritizing profits over the need to reduce their greenhouse gas emissions. So what are some of those incentives that have been given to businesses to ensure that they actually foster this integrity when they are trading in the carbon markets?
I think the big issue here is on data. Yeah, the big issue here is on data, and that is where digitalization is playing a big issue. We now have like central registries through UNFCCC.
Yes.
We also have decentralized registries such as, for example, Gold Standard as a standards body also has a registry which is transparent. And so people are trying to bring in now digital solutions to actually bridge the gap of what someone would report, but also reduce the cost that would be in terms of investing in a carbon project. Because if I have to do verification and I have to go to the field, then it means that there's a heavy cost. But if verification could also come from a point that we're using, say, digital solutions to actually monitor how much emissions that are coming from a given source or technology.
Yes.
So that is what is being explored and being tested, piloted.
Yes.
To ensure that this information is not lost, but is also available for anyone at any time.
Yes. So yes, from what I pick is that technology is really going to play a central role and a very important role in ensuring transparency, integrity, accreditation, and also ensuring that the information that is being shared in form of carbon credits or carbon reduced in form of the credits that are purchased by a business or a buyer is actually accurate. So now, one of the key players within the carbon market space is a policymaker. Those are our legislators and the lawmaking entities or the policies they put in place. So now in the Ugandan context, how are we moving and how are we fast tracking, ensuring that yes, the markets have been here, but our biggest issue has been that it seems the law is the one that is chasing the growth of the carbon markets instead of the other way. Like it seems like the law is arriving last at the party, yet it should be leading from the front. So how effective, how do you think our policies and our laws in the Ugandan context are going to be effective in curbing all these challenges and the limits that come with the carbon markets?
Well, speaking from a point of that discussion, one, I know as a country or as Uganda itself, we have the Climate Change Act of 2021. 2021, yes. And against that Climate Change Act, there was, of course, a section that talked about carbon markets or how Uganda would evolve into the carbon markets. So most recently, I think the announcement was made that we now have a climate change mechanisms or what we call a carbon market regulation.
Yes, regulations under the National Climate Change Act.
Yes, that regulation is operational or at least has been gazetted from what I know.
Okay.
And the picture is it details information on how, in this case, whoever wants to get involved.
Guidelines on how the carbon markets are going to be
how it's going to operate
Uganda.
And everything. Within it, of course, it presents where and how, where you can actually, I mean, of course, if I have an innovation, which in this case, climate action, there's a designated authority that you have to approach with your idea. Then there's a team that is going to look into that information, see whether it meets with, what we have established in the Climate Change Act, but also how it links to our indices.
Yes.
So those regulations are already there. The big picture here for us, I would say, in terms of the country getting ready, one, creating awareness of the availability of that regulation, making it public. Because I'm sure from the discussions I've had previously with the developers, everyone wants to know where is the buy-in. How do I fit in? As an investor, for example, if I'm going to invest into a carbon project, I need to know where do I benefit. I need to know what are my go-to areas.
Yes.
What are my go-to areas? How is it benefiting me? How is it benefiting the state? So the government has, of course, through that regulation, has stipulated processes to be followed, and steps to be followed. The requirements that people have to meet, or in
also the carbon registry.
In terms of the registry, right now, what I know is it's not there.
Yes.
But there's an option for using the UNFCCC registry. Okay. What is lacking is, and I think probably what the government is thinking about is, what do we want to capture in the registry?
Okay.
Because that is data that should be transparent, that should be accessible, but should also create meaning into what we need as a state, as Uganda. So the registry as a nation, I don't think we have, but I know from Kenya, as a body, they were establishing a registry. I don't know how far they've gone with it.
Yes, actually, I was getting to that point where I was going to ask you, is it the same within the East African context?
No. No. I think East African states are different levels. Some countries are way high. a given point of Kenya. Actually, Kenya and Uganda speak a lot, but most of the states are looking at establishing regulations or guidelines. Basically, right now, I think from what I heard recently, I think in one of the meetings I had, they're looking at now establishing guidelines. These guidelines should, one, support whoever the technical team that will be evaluating the projects to issue the letter of acceptance. Because in the end, you cannot do a carbon project minus receiving a letter of acceptance. And this letter of acceptance, or LOA, comes from the government. Yeah. And the government has to look at everything that you've detailed there. And from it, they're looking at things about fairness. Yeah. Does it support the state? Does it support the state's action, ambitions? Does it contribute to the communities that are involved? You get it, right? So those are the things that they're looking. And investors saying, investors in their minds, I mean, from the discussions I've had, are, okay, how much money are we in the end going to get from it? Yeah. The state is saying, we need some money, of course, which contributes to our central development needs as a country and our vision as a country. And so they're looking at that as an arm or wing where they could actually get money, yeah, to invest in our development needs as a state, but also contributes to the global action of
yes. So yes, now I understand, yes, from your discussion that carbon markets are only not going to reduce greenhouse gas emissions, but they are also going to contribute to economic development of countries where investors are investing in these projects. Mm-hmm. So I think, Solomon, I'm already biased about this. Coming from the limits of carbon markets, I do not think they can effectively address or reduce the negative impacts of climate change. Single-handedly, no. Jointly with other initiatives, yes, they can. Yes. So yes, that is when I come in to ask you from your perspective and your view, do you think, from where our discussion started up to this point, if someone asked you, your honest personal view, do you think carbon markets can single-handedly help in reducing the impacts of climate change in our communities?
I want to agree with your biases. I want to totally agree with your biases because there's no one thing that fits everything. Yeah, carbon markets is just one arm that should contribute to, of course, the actions. The other things that the states have to do, of course, is enforce the regulations. Yeah. Yes. And these regulations does not mean, because in the end, we are contributing to the carbon markets. I mean, we're getting into the carbon markets once to get the revenue, but from, for example, our development needs, these actions that we have to do, which, of course, in this case, will mean that we have to stand as a state and say, this is what we're going to contribute to. So that means that the money that is coming from, say, carbon trade would never be enough. Honestly, it can never be enough. We still have to do more, but we will still have to collect revenue, for example, to do our work, but also be mindful that when, say, we collect revenue, say, through tax as a nation, we say, we need to develop, right? We need to develop as a state, fully looking at everyone from every corner of Uganda in this case, from someone deep down in the refugee settlement to someone deep down in an island. They also need the services that for people in the city need, yeah? And that money cannot come from carbon only, yeah? So that means that the actions that we play or everything that we do within our development agenda should ideally look at us looking at carbon as an alternative source that could contribute to it, but not fully depend on carbon.
Yes.
Because in the end, also the price of carbon, varies. Yeah. And for you to have high integrity carbon means that you have to invest a lot of money. Yeah. Either in technology, in human resource, which we may not have, or which we actually do not have right now. Because when you talk about carbon itself or trading carbon within the carbon markets, there's capacity development that needs to come in. That money is not going to come from carbon. We need to do other things. We need to get other sources of money to invest in that. And that means that in the end, we have what we call what we can do and what carbon can contribute to in this discussion. Yes, carbon revenue from the carbon markets will give a push to the action, will bring the incentive for us to do more. But in the end, if we want to develop in a very honest way that is fair to the citizens, that is fair to the globe in this case, then we have to put in more money without thinking about carbon. Do what you have to do, because in the end, the effects of climate change is not going to isolate any individual. Yes, it's going to affect the poor people more, but it's not going to isolate any individual.
Yes.
Today, developing or developed states are also being affected by floods. People are dying of high temperatures, for example. You get it, eh? And that means that you have to invest, for example, in AC or cooling initiatives, for example, to manage the temperatures. But you're not going to do that in an open space. If the temperatures are high, you're going to be affected. Yeah. So our actions should come from a point of, do we want to live sustainably? Do you want to also think of the future that we have, of the children that we have, that we will have? Right now, we are affected. But 10 years from now, if we don't do something, and we think we're waiting for, say, money from carbon markets, then we are losing time. We are losing a lot of times. We should think more in a point of sustainability. And that means that every effort that we put, we should be thinking about the future of those who are going to come after us. Yeah. If we do business as usual, it's going to come and haunt us.
Yes.
And if we think of waiting for the money with a lot of discussions going on, then I would say that we are losing it, and it's going to affect us a lot more.
Yes. So Solomon, thank you so much. At least from what I've picked is that carbon markets are an alternative. They can't be the main route we take in addressing the negative impacts of climate change. We have to use them jointly with other initiatives. Yes, thank you so much. It was great having you here today. Yes, so for all those who want to learn about carbon markets, what I've picked today is that carbon markets cannot single-handedly address the negative impacts of climate change. They do have their shortcomings, but they also have their positives. And we have to use them jointly, and we integrate them with other initiatives that can mitigate or that can help us adapt to climate change. If you are interested in this episode, you can watch the full episode on YouTube, and you can also subscribe to our YouTube channel. You can like and you can share a comment or two about carbon markets. You can interact and share with us whether you think that carbon markets are effective in addressing climate change. I've been your host, Grace, driving eco-sustainability, my perspective. Till next time. Thank you so much for watching.